riparian buffer rebid. Motion to award the Darby Creek riparian buffer contract to J&J Concrete and Paving, Havertown, PA, in the amount of $59,276.25, submitting the lowest responsible bid.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
What section is that going to be?
Any discussion? Go ahead.
What section?
Could I just wanted to ask Mr. Gentili quickly about the Darby Creek riparian. I think I know it this budget. We went over it last time, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, in essence, this is down by the old fire training grounds,
Right.
along where the entrance of the new trail starts.
Exactly,
And
okay.
ends over Murray Place. Well, this buffer is part, we get, I believe it's a $40,000 grant? I'm sorry? 29,000 of it will come from grant money.
That's what I
We'll have
thought.
new parking down in that facility. We'll be doing some blacktop as well as a buffer to prevent erosion into the creek area. So,
Thank you, Mr. Gentili. Appreciate it.
yes, it'll be like a
We're doing like a rain garden. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mrs. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. McGarrett.
Yes.
Mr. Connell.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes.
Mr. Heilman.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes. Number 8, proposed new buildings.
Mr. President.
Commissioner Holmes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a recommendation as to how we handle this. We discussed last week, you know, that we've heard a variety of different plans. You know, we're trying to come up with, you know, what ultimately is the consensus of this board, or at least have 5 votes of this board of the various buildings that we're trying to make. I'd like to suggest that the way we approach this is that we talk about each of the 3 projects separately and propose motions. I would suggest we start with the library, and I'd like to make a motion in a minute, a resolution on the library, and just confirm that that you agree that's the way we should proceed.
Yeah, I think that that's the best way to proceed it, to go by building, which we would reach a schematic at that point.
We're going to go through 3. I thought there were 7.
No, I mean, there's 3 buildings. There's 3.
Buildings.
There's 3
I'm sorry.
We're
I'm
gonna talk
sorry.
about
Buildings.
each-
We're talking about the buildings.
Lots of options.
All right.
About
So-
each building, which will take us
Before,
to...
I got it.
Okay.
Before you do that,
Yeah.
are we going to still discuss this?
Yeah, we're going to have tons of discussion, but
Yeah,
we're going
this
to
is
open
just
discussion with a motion. And then, obviously, the motion
Are
made a
you
second.
doing number 5, Larry? Is that what you're
Well,
continuing discussion?
I would
motion-
assume that our discussion is now going to be
Motion
part of
begins the discussion. Okay, so
All right, so we're going to 8, and we're just going to discuss it now.
and
Okay.
right, exactly.
So can I, before you make a motion,
Well, you make a motion first, then we have...
you're making a
open
motion for
discussion.
number 8?
Right.
Not a specific plan?
Then
Okay.
we begin
Go
discussion.
ahead, Larry.
And we
Sorry.
discuss.
Go ahead.
I want to make a motion with regard to the library, and then would like to discuss it after the motion is raised and see whether or not it gets a second. My motion, Mr. President, is that with regard to the library, I would ask this board to undertake 3 things. 1, to make an immediate commitment to the library now to finance $500,000 toward the badly needed repairs and renovations at its current site. That $500,000 is not out of thin air. Though that number is necessary for the library then to be able to apply for, and we think successfully, the Keystone Grant, which could entitle them to up to $1 million of repairs. As we have discussed in these discussions, repairs to that building, regardless of what we ultimately do with that building, are going to be repairs that are good for whoever uses it, whether it's the library or whether it's some other entity in the future. So in the resolution, I would ask that the board immediately commit to $500,000 now for immediate emergency repairs to the library. I would ask the board also to commit to $5 million for the reconstruction and renovation or the construction of a new building. for the library, not at the site of Darby and Manoa, but for the township to immediately undertake to examine other sites, including but not limited to this township site right here that we are sitting in right now, and I mean the entire footprint of the township building, the Cotrani building, or evaluate the value of the usefulness and effectiveness of renovation at the current existing library site, or to investigate any other viable option, including discuss with the school district whether there's any opportunity to work out any of their sites, whether we engage in selling them some of the township site or the library site, investigating Oakmont or any other opportunity that the school district might have for us to use for a library. And the third commitment I would ask this board to make in that resolution is to immediately charge our staff with that task, to begin to look for a suitable site for the township library, and set as a construction date for a new library or the renovation of the old library, the end of the construction period for the new municipal building and the new police station. So my resolution has three components. I would ask the board that it resolves to immediately fund $500,000 to the library for the badly needed repairs that it has, to commit to a $5 million, to make a $5 million financial commitment to the library to assist in the renovation or new construction of a library, and to immediately charge its staff with the investigation of the appropriate site thereof.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on one second.
Hang on, we
Please.
got
We have a second.
Give a second so we can
Okay, second. So
discuss
let's have
it.
discussion, but let's have orderly discussion, okay?
Okay.
Commissioner Gary?
I did.
Will.
I second.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah.
All right, they want me to be orderly, so I'm going to be orderly tonight, mainly not because of the people out there that don't like me, but my wife's watching me home on TV, and I promised her I'd be orderly. So I'm going to keep my cool. The only thing I want to say is that we put in a lot of work to do option 3B. I would like to go through what we had discussed, and that's the different options that are on the table. Some are as low as mine, 18 million, some are as high as 30 million. And that's what we were supposed to be voting on tonight, not splitting it into different things, because what we're really doing here is we're saying, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but we don't know where that's going to be, and what are we doing there, and it's very confusing. So why don't we just do the options that we talked about? Let the people vote on those options, and if I lose the battle, I lose the battle, and I'll accept that. But that's what I want to do here.
Okay.
Well,
Wait,
I
let me
address that.
Yeah, I can address that. I think you're going to end up at one of the 8 points. If we discuss them one by one, you'll end up with, if you vote for renovation of the library and renovation of the township building and a new police station, you're voting 3.
But
That's what I'm saying. So we can have the discussion of the library.
It's not the same thing, though.
Or-
right?
Let me explain.
I mean, in all-
Mr. President, can
no.
if I could
Please,
just explain my motion.
We had plenty of time
Right.
for the audience to speak.
I made
Please
the
allow us to have
resolution,
discussion.
and I didn't want to spend a lot of time explaining the resolution. I first wanted it out there so that it could be considered and seconded, but obviously we need to have a discussion about it. One of the things we discussed last week in the work session is that we have a number of plans in front of us. First, the original 7 plans that were provided to us. There has been a 3A and a 3B also provided to us. Last week, 3B was provided to us. There was discussion about whether or not it should be evaluated. It should be evaluated. I think people have evaluated it. I have evaluated it. People have discussed it. None of the plans exactly lay out what I just described, and I have listened to our experts who presented on this issue, and I am swayed by what was presented to me as I think, a serious traffic issue that would address the library if it were constructed along with a new township building and a new police station at the corner of Darby and Manoa. There's particular traffic restrictions in terms of the directions you can go. It's a divided road at Darby. There is the Wawa there. that does not affect my commitment to thinking that we need a new library and not just renovate the old one. But I don't want to rule out an evaluation of what a reconstruction of the library at the old site that provided adequate parking and that could possibly address some of the issues that I think can't be fixed at that site. But I'd like to hear our professionals tell us that. The renovation, I do believe that this is a valid site for the library, and as will be obvious when we talk about the township building later, I don't believe that this remains a good site for the township, and I think it should be at the corner of Darby and Manoa along with the police station. So I would want this evaluated as well. So as we discussed last week, you know, we thought the way to proceed here was for people to put concepts and motions and whatever was out there and see whether or not they have the support of the board. You're not going to find 5 votes for any one of the 1 through 7 and 3A and 3B. And what we have to find is a majority of people on this board willing to undertake whatever it is they're willing to do with these 3 buildings, whether in combination or individually. So the library is where I think we should start, because I think it has been the most controversial. It is the thing that was, when folded into the considerations of the property committee, became somewhat controversial, and I think we should address them up front.
Okay. Commissioner D'Amelio.
Thank you.
This is my stuff first.
I appreciate what Commissioner Holmes is stating, and I know he has good intentions, but I don't believe that, I mean, this is something I think that we should have discussed prior to this meeting tonight for this vote, because I've looked at every scheme, and I studied this, and I wrestled with which one I was going to support, if I was going to support any of it. This is something new. This is something that, if you look at this plan, the scheme plan, when I had a First Ward meeting, and I think there's First Ward residents there, did I not present this to you? This is something that I showed them that we were going to vote on tonight. Now something has changed. But let me take a step back. I'm going to say something that I know it's not going to be popular, but this came up in my meeting, and I'm going to ask the solicitor this question because my residents asked this question about a referendum, and it's also in our minutes. I know, you know, let's be civil. I'm just bringing up what the residents asked me, and I don't know the answer to that. And again, it was in our minutes, and it was in the minutes of June 9th. So, with all the different plans, and I agree with Commissioner Holmes, it's going to be rather difficult with all these schemes to come up with an agreeable plan. So, Mr. Solicitor, in order for something like this to go to a referendum, what would need to happen?
You mean the entire question to go on a referendum?
Yeah, should the township, I mean, I'm going to put a hypothetical, should the township borrow up to $30 million, I'll even go $30 million. Should the township borrow up to $30 million to do A, B, and C, or $18 million, or nothing?
Right, it's not an easy question, but let me try and answer it if I could. I mean, in Pennsylvania, we have a strong tradition of having what's known as representative government. That is, you have elections that are hotly contested, and then once the elections are done, then the representatives are supposed to make the decisions, and oftentimes those are very hard decisions, such as this type of decision. And the reason for that is because you don't want every decision just to be thrown out to the public, because you'd never get everything done. So the representatives are elected through elections, and then they're charged with the obligations of making the hard decisions. There are times when a referendum is appropriate, and they're spelled out in different ordinances and in different codes. One of the things where that can happen is when you're borrowing money. It doesn't have to happen when you're borrowing money. When you're borrowing money, you're allowed to incur what is called non-electoral debt, and that non-electoral debt can be done without you folks getting any permission of anybody, up to, I think it's 250% of the government units in an amount aggregate not to exceed 250% of the government unit's borrowing base. So you don't need to get any special permission from the people to do that. There is a provision that allows you to get some type of advice from the electorate if you believe by a majority vote that you need to put that, but there's a process that has to be followed. I don't know that we're at a position at this point in time to even go there, because I don't know that anybody knows what it is that we're doing yet in terms of how much money we're going to spend.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a mean way. I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean in terms of a referendum. I'm not talking in terms of not knowing what you're doing. That didn't come out right.
Jim, are referendums, are they expensive?
Well, they can be expensive, but they also, it can also be, it's also difficult.
$2 million
because,
to do the
it's not
referendum.
something that you take lightly. I mean, it can cost a lot of money, and it takes away the job that you folks have been elected to perform. So you don't want to be running to the polling place with each and every question, or else you'd have no need for commissioners.
Exactly.
So that's kind of, I hope that answered the question. I don't know if it did.
Also delays things.
Go ahead, Jimmy, I'm sorry.
Well, I can't believe he said that, Jim, that then you have no need or no room for commissioners. We have a lot of other duties beside that. And if we're going to let the people who came in here, and basically 7 of them basically supported our plan of Plan B, so if they came in here and they were in favor of that, and the people have spoken out there, I didn't hear them speak about any other plan but Plan B. So I don't understand why you say that you would just do away with commissioners. We have a lot of other duties
No,
in that.
I didn't mean that, Jim. I didn't. If it came out that way, I certainly didn't mean that. I think that the commissioners have a lot of responsibilities, and I think you do a wonderful job. I'm not saying that there's no need for commissioners. What I'm saying is that you're charged with very hard responsibilities, and part of those responsibilities are in spending money. So in a decision like this, I don't know that it's appropriate to go to a referendum. You can, but I don't know that that's the kind of thing that you want to, it's a slippery slope, because if you start going to a referendum on all different spending issues, then you could be taking all the spending issues and putting them on referendum rather than having to make these decisions. I certainly didn't mean that the commissioners don't have any jobs to do. I wouldn't want any of your jobs. I mean, I think you do an excellent job, and you have a lot of hard work. So I didn't mean it that way.
Could I, Mr. President?
You got to understand that we came here thinking it was going to be 4 or 5, and I know the people out there felt there was 4 or 5 different options. I would like to read option 3B and put it on the table, and anybody else that has an option,
All right.
bring yours out and vote on it. And if you vote against 3B and you vote for 6 or whatever number you want to pick,
on the
that's
table
fine.
Yeah, there's a motion
There's
on
a
the
motion
table.
on the table.
That's what we were supposed to do here
President,
tonight.
Could I, Mr. President?
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could just address the electoral debt issue, and then the issue about 3B. Commissioner D'Amelio, one of the problems, electoral debt is used in some narrow circumstances. One, if you have to borrow beyond the borrowing base, you must go to the electorate. Now, we aren't even close to our borrowing limits. And a lot of electoral debt is used for open space commitments. It is often used by the state when the state has a request to spend $565 million on a memorial somewhere. And it's a very discrete issue. But the political process that leads up to the actual wording of the referendum itself is itself a very long and excruciating and pretty expensive undertaking. One of the problems with us going to the electorate on this is that there's no way in the world that 9 of us, that even 5 of us could ever agree to even the wording of the referendum that would go out there. If we said, can we borrow a maximum of up to $30 million to do the borrowing, if we don't get a majority of votes on that, what is the next step we take? Do we then go back to them and say, well, how about 10? And how about 15? In the meanwhile, we can't do anything if certain things have been ruled out by the electorate. And then there is the question of how long is it ruled out by the electorate, because we could simply at the next election, commissioners can just decide to do it anyway because they're legally allowed to do it anyway, and then just face the electorate at the next election. So it will not cure the political difficulty that we have right now coming up with a plan here, because it's really impossible for us to distill this down to a single votable yes-no issue for the electorate to come to. If we were talking about borrowing $100 million, and we were talking about massive projects of infrastructure and sewers and everything that was going to blow through our borrowing base, then we would all put all of our projects together, and we would then ask the people of this township, are you prepared to borrowing over the next 10 years that equals up to $75 million because we're going to exceed our borrowing base, and it's not 75, it would be over 100, and then get the permission to do so. But on a project like this, referendums are distinctly unsuited for that. So, I've said before when we talked about this in June, I consider that to be, this to be our duty, is to go through these kinds of projects and decide and try to compromise and come up with what we want to do, and not to go back to the electorate, because half of us every 2 years face our electorate, and the board and people decide whether or not this board is doing its job or not doing its job. So,
Right.
it's typical Holmes' answer, but I mean that's my position.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And just so you know, this obviously was several questions from my residents who wanted to know about that because of the fact that they don't know how this board would choose any of the schemes. Why did we name them schemes? But anyway.
Yeah, it's a terrible word.
I mean, plans.
Options. I'd like to say options.
I mean, any of the options that we have, and I understood that. What I didn't know was why or how the whereabouts and how to do that if we could. And I think that they deserved an answer from the township.
Sure.
About the referendum and why we could do it or can't do it and what are the pros and cons of that.
It's not cons. It's not can or can't. I just think the cons of it. I don't think it will accomplish what it is you want to accomplish, Mr. D'Amelio, because I think it's too narrow a device to be used.
And I understand. I mean, thank God we're not borrowing $100 million.
Right.
But it could either be $18 or $30 million because either plan that we use, we're still paying. The taxes will go up for it.
Those are the.
I mean, that's going to happen. That's just a fact.
Whatever we do,
and
we're
that's
going
a
to have
fact
to
of
pay
spending
for it.
money.
Yeah, whatever we do, we're going to have to pay for it. Yeah.
And understood. And what I'm not denying is the fact that we have issues and we need to solve those issues. And how do we go about that? No matter how we go about it, whether we renovate everything,
So the reason
your taxes will go up.
The reason I brought this particular motion, and I would like the motion ruled on, is that I think that we have. I think we have heard sufficient information and are prepared to go forward with the police and the township building. And I think that a majority of this board is committed to assisting the library, but I don't think we have all the options evaluated. But I don't want this process to end without a commitment from this board that the library is as important an asset as the township building and as the police station would be. And that's why I'm recommending in this resolution, not that we spend $5.5 million, but that we spend $500,000 on the library right now in order for it to do the repairs it needs to do and to qualify for an additional $500,000 in the Keystone grant. But make the commitment, make the moral commitment of this board right now to commit money to the reconstruction or the new construction of a library. And then it takes it out of
But
charge.
you're putting that front and center.
hold on a
That's
second.
the
Okay,
thing.
yeah, that's fine. Commissioner Harmon?
Yeah, Laurie, does, in your matrix, you have $3,900,000 and some $1,000 for the renovations of the library. Was that based on the Casaccio plan, or no? Where did that come from?
Are you looking at the IMC budget?
Yeah.
Right here.
That's what he's talking about.
Conceptual?
Because Lee Casaccio had done a study of the library and what they needed years ago.
Now, Mike Ryan actually worked on the budget, and he's here this evening.
Okay.
But I believe it was based on the Casaccio report.
Right.
Well, wasn't that closer to $5 million that the Casaccio report showed?
5.5.
You come up?
Yeah, it was roughly, again, Mike Ryan, IMC Construction. Their budget was roughly $4 million.
4 million, was it? Okay, I thought it was closer to 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Soft cost.
5.5.
Well, the one that was given to me was 4 million.
4 million for what? For a new or?
So people are aware there's some science to my thinking about the $5 million. The reason I'm asking for that is that it has to take into consideration the option, if our staff comes back to us with a good viable option, of a different location, of building this from the ground up or knocking down a building and building, as opposed to renovating. Because there's still certainly a number of people on this board and a number of people in of our constituents who don't believe the current site is the proper site for a new modern library. And I happen to believe that way, but I don't want to rule anything out tonight in terms of that renovation. But I'd like us to make the commitment to $5 million so that commitment considers evaluating other sites and not just renovating the one that is currently at. And I think if we go to a number like 3.5 or 4, I don't think we're sending the message that that we will consider a new site, if a new site's the right thing to do, as carefully as we would if we put our money
Commissioner
on it.
Siegel?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. First, the decision that we make now and regarding these buildings, to me, is exactly what we're elected to do. We are elected to make decisions about the future of the community, not to place all of our decisions in the hands back of the electorate. That's why there are elections, and the elections are the referendum on us. No more are we charged with doing a referendum, and I just looked at the original contract price for the Haverford Middle School was $52 million. They did not put that number out for referendum. That was their decision. If we chose to disagree, that's what the voting booth is for, whether it's here, whether it's our state representative, our congressman, our senator, or the president. That's what we're charged with doing, and you do not see referendums on every single thing. That's why they're elections. That said, it's kind of ironic because Commissioner Holmes's proposal is almost to the dollar what is in option 3B for a renovated library, $5,750,000. His proposal is essentially $5,500,000. It's essentially the same amount of money, perhaps allocated slightly differently or with a slightly different study, but it's taken from the same figures that we've heard about 3B. So it's not a figure that has not been discussed, proposed, et cetera. So I think it's certainly a number we can talk about. Whether we choose to vote for it is a separate issue, but there is a motion on the table, and I think we need to
Well, we're still
address it.
discussing this, though.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not
I
saying
thought
not to.
option 3B.
Okay,
So let's
Commissioner
not
Connell?
vote.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Option
Connell,
3B is
discussing it.
for renovation, and the commitment is for renovations and/or new construction.
Right.
So it's the or new construction part.
Right.
And also, so that's where I think that's the difference between 3B and your recommendation.
Can-
Yeah,
can-
absolutely.
can-
Yeah, I don't pretend
you
this
let-
is 3B.
But this commitment also puts the library right here and now up front and center.
Right.
And the original concept that came to the board was, well, the two facilities, the police station and the township building. So I think that's where we should go first, because this is giving our commitment right now to this project. And then once this is done, say if this passes, well, then everything else is gravy then. You don't have to sit back and worry about it. But I think before voting on this, I think everything warrants discussion. And it was the police station and the township building that originally was discussed, and that's where I think we should go, as opposed to putting the library first.
You can discuss anything you want, Chris.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just again, to go back to the referendum. I understand what Dan's saying, and I appreciate that. But when constituents ask a question about it, all I was doing was giving an answer or trying to get an answer for it. I'm not saying that it was right or wrong. I didn't know what the process would be. But if I'm asked that question and I can't answer it, I go to the solicitor.
Nothing wrong with asking the
No,
question.
I'm just saying. So it's not like,
You should be asking
we
the
are
question.
we are elected officials. I understand that, but we can also ask those questions. Now it's a dead issue, and I understand that. That's fine, because I think the residents demanded an answer to that question. They deserve it. They're taxpayers, and that's all that was.
Okay.
But going back to the other point of the $5 million for the, and I agree with your comments, Commissioner Connell.
If I could just jump in, Commissioner, but just to help with that.
Sure.
Your question was a good question, and it's a difficult question because I can tell you that it even took me a while to figure it out to get to an answer for you, so.
No, and I appreciate
Okay.
what you did. I understand what you were saying, and I appreciate the work that you did for it.
Oh, let him finish, then you can go.
Huh?
Just, no, let Steve finish. Are you done?
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, listen, we were given this municipal facility study, basically, to go through. We did that, and basically, we came up with this option 3B. Now, Larry, or what Dan just said about Larry, he basically was agreeing with 3B. Well, if he'll second that motion, and we'll vote on it, whether I win or lose, I'll give him a hug. Okay?
I would love to see that.
You would love to see that, and I'll do that.
How about we
But
just
I
find
do
out
want to
now?
read this option, and let me at least put it on the table, see if there's a second, let's have a vote on it. If I lose, I lose, but let's not kid each other. We went through all this,
So-
I know I did, and we came up with option 3B. I just want to vote on option 3B.
No, I
Okay,
appreciate that.
Hold on one second.
You can have a variation.
You're
from
saying
the
we should
options, 'cause
vote
no one else
on
can.
each plan. Is that what you're?
No, I'm saying I'm going to offer option 3B and to vote on it. I'll read this whole thing.
Don't
But
read the whole thing.
you are asking, Commissioner
Yes, it is.
McGarity, you're asking for a variation from the original municipal study plan. And what Commissioner Holmes, I believe, is asking is a variation, small, very slight variation from the plan that you're presenting. So he has a motion on the table on a particular plan. The only question I have is whether the $500,000 to the library has to be committed to repairs in order to get the Keystone grant. Is that a nuance that maybe we have to be aware of? Is it just slated, or can it go toward, if we commit the $500,000, can you apply for that Keystone grant? Does it have to be slated to something particular?
The motion is-
And I'm
You have
sorry
to-
to put this
you have
question to
to-
you, Mr. Blackwell, but
Mr. Blackwell, come up to the podium.
I just want to make sure that that money does not have to be in a specific place in order for that Keystone grant to be considered.
I'm Christopher Blackwell. I live at 28 Mill Road in Havertown, very close to the library. And I'm honored to serve as the current president of the board of the library. That said, the issue with the Keystone grant is matching funds. Funds that are going to be applied to whatever the proposal for the Keystone grant is going to entail.
Okay.
Now, I'd like just to sidestep a little bit and tell you what's happened in media. Media was awarded a $500,000 Keystone grant in the 2014 cycle. Originally, for major improvements to their existing building. In their case, and of course it's different for us and specific to them, they were advised, after looking at the plans for the renovations, that for the same price, they could do a knockdown. In their, I don't think that would apply to us. In their case, there happens to be a vacant firehouse almost opposite the existing library and media. So it's a no-brainer for them. That's where they're going to move to temporarily, while their new building is created on the site of their current building. So you ask, the question should be asked, well, did that jeopardize the Keystone grant?
That's
The
my
answer is
question.
not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Because they were smart in the way they applied for the grant. They were thought through they gave themselves as much flexibility as possible. That's important. The other thing that's important with any kind of grant project is that you've got to get a productive working relationship with the program officer that's in charge of that grant.
Right.
That's basic. So
Okay.
we need to be sure that we create that relationship along with the proposal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the answer to that question. It clarifies a few things, and I think that it actually highlights that what Commissioner Holmes just said was that this is what happened. You get the plans back, and all of a sudden you realize maybe renovating that spot is not ideal. And isn't it our job to decide whether renovating that library is not ideal or finding another place. But at this juncture, we need to move forward on a decision with the municipal and the police department. So we're making 3 decisions. But my fear, and I want to say that I have been on this board for 3 years now, I've been a liaison to the library for 3 years, the library needs to be done. I've been saying it from the beginning, and I just have to say, I need a commitment from this board that this library will be done. And I ask you to vote on this ahead of the municipal and the police, because we decided last year on the municipal and police, and I believe that this board will move forward with that, but I think that we've looked at, excuse me, I'm sorry. I think that we've looked at everything, and if you look at option 1, it says, a new township administration building with a police station and a renovated library. Just take a moment and say, maybe we don't renovate the library, but let's pull that out and, you know, handle it separately and change it ever so slightly, but make a commitment to this library and make a commitment to this community for this library. And that's what we've been talking about for a year. So let's not backstep, let's move forward. And let's, you know, take all of this information that we've been so dutifully given by this administration that has worked so hard, and commit to our library board that we're going to do something.
And if I may, I don't know whether it's appropriate now to say this or not, but when you're talking about commitment, I have asked my library board what they're prepared to commit to. We totally understand that without your help, there's very little we can do, very little we can accomplish. So whatever you give us, we're going to be very grateful for. And in talking about commitment, we do have a fund which is called the Capital Campaign Fund. And we are prepared to commit probably as much as all of that fund under the right circumstances to, we never ever wanted anybody to feel that we would not put some skin in the game. Now, there's several zeros less that we can put on the table than you can put on the table. But we will do whatever we can to raise money over and above what you give us.
Mr. President?
Good.
If I could ask Mr. Blackwell a question. Is a verbal commitment from the township, not just for the $500,000 in the Keystone grant, but a commitment on our part for either a significant renovation or a construction, does that assist you in the fundraising process?
Absolutely. Absolutely it does.
One of the concerns I have about is very similar to Jane's, and I've been on the board longer than, sorry, Mrs. Hall. The last time the library really undertook an effort to try to build a new building, it really got out ahead of the Board of Commissioners. It got out ahead of a lot of people. It made some really terrific plans, and you know their dream of doing something on Eagle Road was, I think, at the end of the day, just thwarted by the fact that it just got out a mile ahead of everybody. I think it's extremely important for the township to be the first folks that are out ahead of the library on this, to enable the library to go out there. And to fundraise. And we're talking about introducing time into this concept, since one of the possibilities could be the construction of the library right here on this site. This site we can't do anything with this site until the township is up and running in a new place. That staggers the construction costs, staggers the amount of money that our township ultimately goes out into debt for, and it also gives a little more breathing room from the just heavily saturated, donor market that was frankly wrung out over the construction of the YMCA. So I just want this board to understand that's the purpose of those two commitments. The one is the dollars right now to get work done and to be able to get construction Keystone grant. But the other is the commitment that we're serious about this, and that this time the library doesn't find itself out ahead of everybody with their necks out and nobody else's necks out.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm recommending this. Now, Mr. McGarity, I understand your revised option 3B, and you're certainly at any point welcome to move that we consider that option. And I'll hug you myself if it gets 5 votes, and promise me you'll hug me if my motion gets 5 votes, and we'll all be okay here. But I have, as Mrs. Hall has described, it's really a very insignificant deviation from option 1, which is that it keeps the option of not a renovated library, but a new library. And it does have the very real difference from option 1 that we are not talking about constructing 3 things right now. And I think that's something we as a board ought to take very seriously, the ability for us to stagger the amount of expense, the capital commitment that we'd be making all at once, and enable different projects to go at different paces. So,
Okay, now, hold on one second before
Okay.
you go. Commissioner?
So, I say that, I certainly recommend that my colleagues
up
here on the
first.
board,
Yeah.
I just recommend that my colleagues on the board consider that motion with regard to the library. I do not think it affects in any way our ability to proceed in the way that people would like to proceed with the township building and the police.
Okay, so can we do this? Just we're all on the same page, can we make that part of the first schematic? Modify scheme 1 with your changes to scheme 1, and then you can, then you'll have,
That's kind of where I was going, actually, myself,
You know what I'm
because
saying? That way
I
we-
look at it and I think Scheme 1 is a little bit light on what the Casaccio plan had. And the Casaccio plan, I thought, renovated the library in a way that it was newer, it was more modern. I thought it was a very good plan. And I just remembered it being higher, and Commissioner Wexler was shaking his head yes, that he thought it was higher as well.
Yeah,
So I'd like to look at that. It was 5 million.
5.5.
I think the 3.9 in option 1 is light, and that's what I'm worried about. Personally, I was the liaison to the library board before Jane and before Larry, and we've
I was
kind
before
of
you.
kicked this can down the road for a while, and I think the library always seems to get shortchanged, and that's why I'd kind of like to discuss it now to make sure the library doesn't get shortchanged. And that's how it is. I mean, I asked last week when you said either include the library or don't include the library, and the way I took it was, it almost sounded like the library was going to get left behind again. And-
Absolutely not.
Well, we talked about it afterwards, but when I did it, hang on, I did ask you
has
in
the
a
floor,
public meeting.
please.
I asked you in the public meeting, and the way you answered me, and we corrected it in the back when we talked, but the way you answered me, it led me to believe that I either had to decide to put the library building in the new building, or the library building was out of luck. And when we talked in the back, it was corrected. That's why I felt I was being pushed into saying, okay, let's put the library in the new building. And that's not what I wanted in the first place, and I felt like I had to make that decision because of the way it was presented to me. I just want to make sure the library is not left behind, and that's why I would like to see option 1 modified to actually reflect the numbers that were in the Casaccio report.
Could you
Okay.
put option 1 up so the residents can see
Yeah,
it?
sure.
Can we do that?
Wait, Mario, can I at least,
Jim, hold on one second, okay?
Okay.
I'm trying to get to where you want to be, okay? So we can vote, we can compare
Right.
the plans, okay?
well, I got to say, Mario, you're a long way off.
Right, I have it. Yeah.
Commissioner Harriman, are you making essentially a motion to amend Mr. Holmes'
Yeah, I'm rolling
Red arrow.
Larry's into
the
Until
combined
scheme
library?
binding
combined-
into Scheme 1.
Okay.
And committing for the 500,000 early so they can apply for the grant.
Would you accept that amendment?
With one clarification, this does not rule out a new library. I mean, I would change option 1, that it could be a renovated library or it could be a new library, depending on location, depending on
And
the advice
cost.
we get, depending
In
on
that
the
dollar figure range, I don't have a problem with
Yeah,
it.
all I'm asking for is a $5 million commitment, which I think is a lot closer to the real number than the number that's on there.
Yeah, as long as it's not at Manoa and Darby, and as long as it's,
Right, and my motion is not to be.
and
a
as long
Darby
as
and
it's no more than the 5 whatever million the Casaccio plan was.
Well,
I'd like that looked up if we could.
Okay.
Jim,
Hey, it's right up
Can
there.
I
Yes?
ask Jim a question?
Him,
Byron?
our solicitor?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
It's not a new police station.
We've had this construction, this IMC, and I appreciate what these gentlemen are trying to do. and
them
It's their job. But we've had this for, I don't know how long. And now, tonight, when we're voting on it, it seems to me that
Can we please have quiet,
this change,
please?
Where's your gavel?
I guess, I don't know if it's new to anybody else, but it sounds like it wasn't, but I don't know that. I don't know that for a fact.
Wait a minute.
So,
What are you,
I'm sorry.
never mind.
Go ahead.
What were you
Go
going
ahead.
to say, Mr. Heilman?
Business of voting in the back room line.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
So, I'm asking you,
King of back room votes.
I'm sorry, I can't, because I'm hearing him talk, and does he have something to
Can
say?
we please have quiet? Please?
So, my question is, we've had this out for, I don't know how long.
This
Now
being
that-
the feasibility study.
Sure,
Okay.
exactly. And I'm okay if you say it's okay we can change it tonight after reviewing it with the residents for I don't know how long. We've had it on the website for I don't know how long. Dan sent out, and I have, emails about the different options, and that option was in there. There was never any discussion about and all of us have made a commitment to the library. It's none of us have said no to committing ourselves to the library in some fashion. So this change, minutes before we're going to vote, is that okay?
A change in terms of the motion that Commissioner Holmes made, is that what you're talking about?
Because in option one, it says library new. It wasn't even part of it then.
Okay, well, here's what my thoughts are on all that. I mean, it's kind of a broad agenda item that you have before you here tonight. What becomes fair game within what's contained in the question that you have before you tonight and what isn't. You can always, as a board, bring up new matters to the agenda, add to the agenda. You need a majority of the full board to bring up a change. If you believe, or if the chairman, I guess, would be, if you believe that this is a change, then we would say, well, then this is a new matter to the agenda, and then we would have to have a vote on whether that's okay. And if we get a majority of the full board, which we have here tonight, then certainly we could vote on that motion as well.
But the motion is for the building itself, okay? So it's for the buildings themselves. It's not for a particular option. So what he